She was standing in front of the most expensive restaurant in the city, wearing a dress that was too simple for the neighborhood. A group of wealthy men were leaving the place, laughing loudly, all in impeccable suits and with cell phones in hand. One of them stopped in front of her, raised his cell phone, and in front of the camera said, "Look, guys, how desperate you will be for a free plate of food." The others laughed. The girl stood still, with her eyes downcast, as the filming continued. "Let's make her famous. Maybe some chef will take pity." And so the video of her humiliation went viral, not out of charity but out of mockery. She didn't say a word that day, but years later, in court, she stood up from the judge's chair, looked at the same man, now accused of corruption and destruction of evidence, and declared, "Today, the one who decides your sentence is me." The entire room fell silent. He, accustomed to manipulating conference rooms, contracts, and judges, was speechless. The same face he had ridiculed in his youth now stared at him with steady eyes, without a trace of revenge, only the strength of someone who had survived contempt. No one there knew, but while he had laughed at the ragged girl years ago, she had spent late nights studying with borrowed books, cleaning offices where he held meetings, saving pennies to go to law school. And when he became the center of a national investigation, it was her name that came up among the names of the federal judges, chosen for the final hearing. She had never sought him out. She had never responded to the humiliation. But fate had placed her where few ever reach. And now, the one sentence she had said was enough to make it clear. Time knows how to correct what arrogance tries to destroy in silence. If this turn of events gave you goosebumps as much as it gave me goosebumps while writing it, then show that you're with us. Leave a like now, subscribe to the channel and follow me, because this story has only just begun. The sun was beginning to set over the skyscrapers of Manhattan, tinting the windows of million-dollar buildings with gold. Inside an exclusive restaurant at the top of Park Avenue, loud laughter echoed between marble walls and crystal glasses. Young men, all heirs to corporate empires, toasted at tables surrounded by discreet waiters and impeccably dressed women. Among them was Noah Lexington, the most famous of them all. Handsome, arrogant, and followed by millions on social media, he was known for turning every provocation into viral content. That night the game was simple. Film something shocking that would earn them more followers. As the waiter poured the next French wine, one of them pointed out the window. "Look at that." Across the street, leaning against a lamppost, a girl with a worn backpack and worn-out shoes watched the restaurant as if dreaming without permission. Noah smiled, held up his cell phone and said, "I think I found my content for today." He left. With two friends, crossed the street, and as he approached, noticed that she didn't even try to run away. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked mockingly. She shook her head, eyes steady. "Then let me give you a reason to get out of here." The camera filmed everything. His laughter cut through the silence of the sidewalk like razors, but she remained there, silent, like someone who has seen too much humiliation to be shaken by another one. Noah returned to the restaurant satisfied. He posted the video with the caption, "Trying to have dinner in peace and look what appears." He knew it would explode, and it did. In less than 2 hours, it was trending. Comments, jokes, memes. No one wanted to know who the girl was. She became a joke, that's all. But that same night, sitting in a public library with borrowed Wi-Fi and second-hand books on constitutional law, she saw her own face on thousands of screens. She squeezed her eyes shut, closed her laptop, and went back to studying. Something inside her was burning, but it wasn't hate. It was a rare kind of silence that only the humiliated recognize, the silence of promise. One day, he too will look down on me. From a young age, she learned that silence was a way of surviving. Her name was Evelyn, and her story never began with luck. Her mother disappeared when she was just 7, leaving behind a crumpled note and an empty pill bottle. Her father, who was already rarely home, sank into alcohol and apathy. Evelyn grew up in a forgotten neighborhood in the Bronx, where the sound of sirens was more constant than any lullaby. She slept on a torn couch, sharing space with the leaking roof and the musty smell that never left the mattress. She learned early to count time not by birthdays, but by evictions and hasty moves. At school, she avoided drawing attention to herself. She carried a cold sandwich wrapped in newspaper and hid her torn sneakers under her desk. She was invisible to everyone except those who wanted to make fun of her. When she finally earned a partial scholarship to a better school, she found herself among kids complaining about the slow Wi-Fi while she counted coins for the subway. And even there, silent, she listened. She paid attention to every word her teachers said, memorized every page she could, copied books she didn't have. She worked cleaning bathrooms at night after school. She washed dishes until her hands cracked in the winter. And yet, she kept going, with her notebook under her arm and her eyes focused on something that no one else seemed to see. A place for her in the world, far from misery, humiliation, and pity. She never begged for money, not out of pride, but because no one listened to her. When something hurt, she just lay down, turned her face against the pillow and waited for it to pass. She grew up hearing that she would amount to nothing, that she was just another statistic, one of the many single girls the city was swallowing up. But she didn't want to prove she was different. She just wanted to survive. Until one day she heard a lecture at school about criminal law, and there, for the first time, something lit up inside her. A spark, a vision. She began to study law like someone breathing. When she gained access to the public library, it was as if she had found shelter. Each book was a brick that she stacked inside herself, building a fortress. There was no social media, no time for parties. Just her silence, and the hope of one day being on the other side. Not to get revenge, but to never feel small again. Humiliation, she would learn later, does not need shouting to be repaired. Just keep walking while others stumble over their own arrogance. The video Noah posted that night was just another joke for him. Among so many others that had already gone viral, this one seemed banal. But what made it different was the immediate reaction of thousands of followers who found the way he ridiculed a stranger hilarious. Typical of New York smartasses, they said. Others replicated the caption, "Trying to have dinner in peace and poverty wants to sit by the window." In private groups, Noah and his friends laughed at the comments, creating memes with Evelyn's face frozen in the moment she is confronted. In one of the internal videos recorded right after the post, Noah makes an informal bet with his friends. "I bet you $1,000 that this video hits 1 million views before breakfast." They toast, and it does. Within a few hours, Evelyn was the new face of digital public humiliation. Influencers reposted with irony. Comedy channels reacted. A famous talk show host made a joke. She didn't ask for a table, but she got the stage. And even though no one knew her name, they knew how to make fun of her. Evelyn watched it all in silence. Some of her classmates commented on how the girl in the video was really kind of weird, without knowing they were talking about her. A teacher even used the video as an example of social prejudice during a class, and she felt her face burn. But she said nothing. Noah, on the other hand, gained followers, invitations to podcasts, and even an offer to star in a reality show about the lives of heirs. The video became his identity for a while. The bet earned him a new car, not because he needed it, but because one of his friends lost the joke and bought him a Tesla. Evelyn's humiliation had become a trophy. The world laughed, but she didn't cry. She just mentally noted everything she didn't want to be, and everything she would do to never be on that side of the camera again. She began to study with more anger. Anger converted into discipline. She spent sleepless nights reviewing doctrines, studying case law, writing essays that she corrected with exhausted eyes. That was how she managed after trying so hard to get into law school at a public university. The scholarship covered part of her expenses. The rest she made up for by cleaning bathrooms at a company that provided services for the same building where Noah kept one of the offices of the startup he had inherited. She would see him sometimes, walking in with long strides and headphones in his ears. He never recognized her, and she preferred it that way. After all, the world didn't need to know that the girl who had been humiliated was now studying law. One day that would have a purpose. For now she just kept walking, observing, taking notes, and waiting for time to take care of the rest. The morning they crossed paths again. Time seemed to have frozen for a few seconds. Evelyn wasn't wearing her cleaning uniform. She was already a student in her final semester of law school and doing a mandatory internship at the district courthouse in downtown Manhattan. She was walking up the stairs with folders in her arms when the elevator door opened and, to her surprise, Noah stepped out accompanied by two lawyers in ties. He looked older, but maintained the same confident posture as always. The two glanced at each other briefly, and something in his eyes wavered. Evelyn stood firm, showing nothing. He, distracted, didn't recognize where he had recognized that fixed, intense look from, but he couldn't hide his discomfort. Evelyn knew. She remembered every second of that night frozen in time, the biting cold of the sidewalk and the camera pointed at her. And now, years later, she was standing before the man who laughed at her silence, and who now also seemed to not know what to say. In the courtroom, she stood among the interns, while Noah, on the other side, waited for the judge to release him for a civil case related to his company. Nothing too serious, at least not yet, but Evelyn could tell. He was involved in problems that were going to get worse. As she left the room, she passed him back in the hallway. Noah stopped for a moment. "Do you work here?" he asked, as if trying to pull something from memory. She just nodded. "I think we've met before," he added. Evelyn answered with the same firmness as years ago. "Yes." He smiled sideways, a little embarrassed, and extended his hand. "Noah." She shook it lightly. "Evelyn." He said nothing more. He didn't explain. He didn't remind. He didn't accuse. And that bothered him more than any speech. Evelyn went back to her office, her heart racing, but her posture unshakable. That brief encounter was all she needed to understand that the world turned, and it really did turn. She was now part of a system that could judge, approve, and archive, and he, who had once used the camera as a weapon, now walked through the hallways she crossed with knowledge. The difference was that he continued to act as if the world were a stage, and she already knew the weight of a sentence. At the end of the day, Evelyn left the building and looked at the sky between the buildings. She didn't feel euphoria, just an internal confirmation. She was where she was supposed to be, and that encounter wasn't the end of anything. It was just the harbinger of something bigger that was about to happen. When she got home, she opened her books and studied as usual, but for the first time in a long time, the name Noah appeared written at the bottom of a page with an arrow next to it. The past was beginning to align with the present, and she knew silence would continue to be her strongest weapon. Noah wasn't the type to remember faces off camera, and so, even after that meeting in court, he didn't connect the dots. Evelyn, to him, was just another one among many faces that circulated behind the scenes of the legal world. But something started to bother him, that firmness in her gaze, the way she didn't give in to his rehearsed charm, nor did she show any interest in being noticed. This hurt a type of vanity that Noah had always cultivated, that of being irresistible even when he wasn't trying. Days later, they met again at a public legal event, where Noah had been invited as an investor in a new startup focused on legal technology. Evelyn was there as part of the college's support team, helping to organize and welcome the speakers. When he arrived, Noah saw her from afar and, smiling, went over to her. "You again. I think the universe is trying to bring us together, huh?" he said in a light tone. Evelyn, emotionless on her face, replied, "Or maybe it just wants to remind you of something." That was enough to wipe away his smile. A group of nearby students heard the sentence and laughed quietly. He didn't understand what she meant, but he felt exposed. To make matters worse, during the presentation on stage, Noah decided to improvise a joke to recover his wounded ego. "These events are great, until you're greeted by a receptionist who looks like a judge." They laughed. But Evelyn, who was on the side of the auditorium, didn't move. She didn't even blink. She was the only one there who didn't give in to the attempt to embarrass him, and that bothered him even more. At the post-event cocktail party, he tried to approach her again, this time in a larger group. "Has anyone here ever been judged by an intern?" More laughter. Evelyn looked at him for a few seconds and calmly said, "It depends." Some interns are better at reading character than certain investors are at maintaining their own. The sentence caused a brief silence. A professor next to her cleared his throat and said, "Brilliant observation." Noah forced a smile, but the expression on his face already betrayed his discomfort. Evelyn had, with just a few words, turned the tables, and she knew it. The public may not remember an ordinary face, but they never forget when someone elegant dismantles an arrogant one with elegance. After the event, she went home wearing the same worn-out shoes as always. He went to a luxurious penthouse, but he couldn't sleep. For the first time, someone's indifference hurt more than explicit contempt. And that would mark him, more than he could imagine. The revelation didn't come as revenge. Evelyn wasn't that kind of person. She didn't want him to suffer what she had. She just wanted him to know, to hear with his own ears, what perhaps silence hadn't been able to say for so long. The moment happened on a normal day, with no audience, no cameras, no virtual audience. She was in the courthouse waiting for documents to be released when Noah appeared at the counter next door, talking loudly to an aide. Something about wanting to speed up a process, press for an opinion, get this bureaucracy sorted out quickly. He noticed Evelyn and, like the other times, tried to charm her. "You're always here, huh?" Evelyn just looked at him, serene. "Yeah, some come out of obligation, others out of merit." He laughed, a little embarrassed. "You talk as if you know me." She then turned around and looked at him. "I do." His smile faltered. "Oh, really?" Evelyn nodded. "You filmed me a few years ago, outside Leblanc. You said I was disturbing your dinner." The sentence fell like a stone into a still lake. Noah paled. Were you?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "Yes." He was silent for a moment. I had no idea." "I know. It was a stupid joke," she answered without anger. "It was humiliating." Noah tried to justify himself. "It was another time, another moment." But she interrupted calmly. "It was your character." He lowered his eyes. Evelyn continued. "I don't hate you, Noah. I never did. But I never forgot." He tried to say something, but she didn't give him any space. "That night I was reduced to a joke, but I went home and studied. I've studied every night since. And today, I don't need you to apologize. I just need you to understand what you did." The boy shook his head slowly. "I understand." "I doubt it." She gathered up her documents and before leaving added, "But you'll understand. Soon." Noah stood at the counter, alone, speechless. For the first time, he felt the weight of a mistake he never thought would have consequences. The humiliation she had suffered was now returning with a silent force, not as revenge but as truth. Evelyn didn't look back. She left the courtroom with the calm steps of someone who no longer needed to explain herself. And he, rooted to the spot, began to remember the video, the voice, the laughter. And he understood that the story hadn't ended that night. It was just beginning. In the days that followed that conversation, something inside Noah began to shift. For the first time, he felt that one of the loose ends of his life, the ones he had always ignored, had returned with a face, a voice, and consequences. He began to look for the old video, not because he didn't remember, but because he wanted to face it. He reviewed the recording as if watching a stranger. He saw her scornful expression, the way she filmed Evelyn with contempt, as if she were no human being. He read the comments. He felt ashamed. But it was only when he clicked on a forgotten news article from months ago that something really hit him. It was an article about young people on the rise in the field of law, and there she was, Evelyn Duarte, 25, a law student who had won awards in mock jury competitions, the daughter of a former homeless man with a history of overcoming obstacles, quotas, and a full scholarship. The article told how she had worked since she was 14, how she had faced abandonment and still stood out. The article was moving, but the detail that hurt the most was the last paragraph. The young woman who became a symbol of resilience was once a victim of cyberbullying after a video of public humiliation went viral years ago. She never wanted to sue those responsible. She preferred to study in silence. Noah closed his laptop. His throat went dry. For the first time, he felt ashamed not only of the video, but of his own life, of everything he had done for laughs, for likes, for vanity. Evelyn was not just a poor girl. She was a survivor. And he had been just another one who tried to push her into the abyss. With a heavy heart, he searched through his old group of friends. One of them, Carter, was still active in the same cycle of parties and mockery. Noah sent a direct message. "Did you know who she was?" The answer came minutes later. "Of course I did, since sophomore year. Didn't you recognize her? It was the girl from the library, the one from the Bronx, remember? The one who didn't answer to anyone. The same one from the video." The revelation hit like lead, Carter knew. And he laughed anyway. He used her anyway. He still got a lot of views. Noah distanced himself from everything. From social media, from meetings, from friends. For the first time, he felt that the image he had built was fragile, based on rotten pillars. Evelyn had survived everything he thought was unthinkable, and yet she had become something greater than he had ever dared to be. Honest, strong, able to look at him without screaming, and that dismantled him more than any scandal. The shame he felt now was deep and silent, like that of someone who finally sees the truth, too late. After the revelation, Evelyn simply disappeared from his sight. Not on the websites, not on the networks. She disappeared from his presence. For weeks, Noah returned to the court a few times, claiming to have legal commitments, but deep down, looking for her in the hallways, in the courtrooms, in the elevators. And nothing. Evelyn had changed departments, transferred to a temporary federal court to follow a high-profile case. And even though he told himself he didn't care, each day he didn't see her was a silent reminder of something unresolved. He began to realize how much he missed that firm, silent presence. It was strange. Surrounded by people, surrounded by invitations and distractions, he missed someone who would even smile at him. But that was exactly it. Evelyn wasn't like the others. She didn't flatter. She didn't try to please. She didn't need to prove anything. And now that she was gone, Noah discovered the emptiness she left behind, a kind of silence that echoed differently. He began to observe the people around him more, the employees he had previously ignored, the faces he had never stopped to look at. He noticed how he talked more than he listened, how he judged before he understood. And, most importantly, how Evelyn managed to be remembered even when she was not present. She was in the discreet glances of the interns, in the respectful way the judges spoke of her, in the compliments that escaped the hallways. Without needing a stage, without needing the spotlight, only with the weight of integrity. Noah tried to find her on social media, but could not find any profile. He sent indirect messages to mutual acquaintances with no response. He started watching videos about ethics in law, reading articles that had not previously interested him. In one of them, he found a quote highlighted by Evelyn in an old lecture. "True justice does not shout, it weighs." That stayed in his head for days. For the first time, Noah was being judged by himself, and he was losing. On a grey morning, he went to the public library in the Bronx. He did not know exactly why. Maybe it was instinct. And there, at the back of the room, he saw the same place where Evelyn had studied years before. The simple table, the dim lamp, the fogged-up window. He imagined her there, night after night, preparing herself not to take revenge, but to become someone greater. He sat in the same place. He stayed there for hours without touching his cell phone, just listening to his own silence. And he understood that Evelyn's absence was, in fact, a presence, one that made noise inside him, a sound he couldn't silence. Noah's castle began to crumble almost imperceptibly. First, there was a footnote on a legal website. Startup investigated for suspicious contracts with law firms linked to the Lexington family. Then came the comments on specialized forums, questioning the transfer of funds in the name of academic partnerships. In a short time, his name stopped being synonymous with easy success and became an example of how corporate arrogance does not support an ethical structure. The press, sniffing out scandal, dug up files, testimonies, documents. It was then that a journalist found the old video. The same one, of the sidewalk, of the humiliation. Now, out of the context of a joke, the content seemed brutal. It went viral again, but this time with a different tone. See how the powerful treat the invisible. Evelyn didn't comment. She didn't repost. But the whole world now knew who she was. Noah's followers began to drop. Brands ended contracts. Lectures were cancelled. A TV show gave up on reality TV. And worst of all, there was silence from those who had previously flattered him. They disappeared, one by one. The same people who had laughed with him no longer wanted to be associated with his name. Public opinion no longer forgave as easily as before. The young people who had previously followed him now created videos criticizing him. Renowned lawyers spoke out against his stance. Even former employees gave interviews denouncing the toxic environment at the company. Noah, who had never had time for introspection, was forced to face his own image in a raw way. And in the midst of this chaos came the final blow, a court summons to provide clarifications about documents that had been tampered with in projects linked to the company's name. The court where he was supposed to appear was the same one where Evelyn worked. He knew that the world turned, and it turned fast. On the morning of the hearing, photographers were waiting for him at the door. Questions were shouted. Do you regret it? Are you going to apologize to the judge? How does it feel knowing that she will be there? He didn't answer. He just walked. The courtroom was packed. Among those present was Evelyn. She sat serenely, her eyes fixed on the case files. She wasn't the one who would judge him at that moment, but everyone knew that silent justice had already begun. Noah sat in the dock wearing a jacket that seemed heavier than usual. It weighed down his story. It weighed down what he had lost. It weighed down what he didn't want to see. And on the other side, without raising her voice, Evelyn was the living reminder that you shouldn't step on those who are below you. Because sometimes, that's exactly where the one who will one day look down on you comes from. Noah's transformation was neither quick nor romantic. There was no epiphany in the rain, nor emotional speeches in front of mirrors. What there was discomfort, a constant discomfort that began to eat away at what he thought he was. In the first few days after the hearing, he tried to maintain his routine, but his cell phone no longer rang with invitations, his emails were full of rejections, and his friends, if any, disappeared. The silence that Evelyn had always carried as strength now surrounded him like punishment. He tried to escape it, but it was useless. For the first time, he listened to his own thoughts, and he didn't like what he heard. He began to walk through neighborhoods he had previously avoided. He observed people sitting on the sidewalks, young people balancing backpacks and hopes on their shoulders, old women selling candy at the subway entrance, not with pity, but with guilt. He began to visit community centers in secret. He asked if they needed anything. He gave them anonymous donations. A shelter coordinator asked him why he did that. He replied, "Because I was the kind of person who would never look at you, and now I can't stop looking." He read about ethics. He read about social injustice. He spent hours listening to lectures by public lawyers, minority advocates, activists. And in every speech, he heard echoes of Evelyn. He decided to close his company, without fanfare. He paid his employees, distributed the equipment to schools, liquidated everything. Not because he wanted to disappear, but because he wanted to start over. No makeup, no facade, no followers. Just him, and whatever was left of truth. One day he walked into the same library where Evelyn had studied years ago. He sat in the most hidden corner and stayed there, not to be seen, but to feel. A boy approached him and asked if he was the guy in the video. Noah hesitated. Then he said, "I am, and I regret it every day." The boy replied, "The girl in the video won. She became a judge, right?" Noah smiled with pain and admiration. "She did." The boy left, and Noah stood there, sitting, small, real. On the outside, the world went on, but on the inside, something was finally changing. It wasn't about making a public apology or cleaning up his own image. It was about understanding the damage and trying to never do the same thing again. Noah didn't want applause, he wanted awareness. And even though he knew that some doors were closed forever, there was one that he still hoped for deep down, the forgiveness that might never come. But that, even so, he chose to deserve. The reunion did not happen with pomp or warning. It came as things that really matter do, in the midst of silence. Evelyn had recently been appointed as a substitute judge for a special session to review old cases in partnership with universities. A discreet but important event, where former students, judges, and representatives of the legal community gathered to discuss failures and reparations. Noah, now a volunteer at an NGO that provides legal support to low-income youth, was invited to participate as an observer. He did not know she would be there, and although she knew his name was on the list, she did not expect him to have the courage to show up. But he did. He entered the room with measured steps, head down, without his usual adornments. He wore a simple shirt, no watch, no security, no arrogance. Evelyn saw him from afar. For a moment, everything seemed to come back. The sidewalk, the cold, the pointed cell phone, the laughter. But she took a deep breath. She was different now. They were. At the end of the panel, as the guests were milling around, Noah approached. Calmly. There was no audience. Just the two of them. "Judge Duarte," he said respectfully. Evelyn looked at him for a few seconds. "Mr. Lexington." He lowered his eyes, then slowly raised them. "I'm not the master of much anymore." She nodded. "But you seem more human." He smiled sadly. "It took me too long to realize." They fell silent. All around them, conversations continued. But there, in the middle of that small space, there was a kind of suspension in the air. "I watched the video again," he said, "and I also saw your story. Everything you built. Everything you endured." Evelyn kept her eyes steady. "I didn't do it to prove anything." "I know. But you proved it. Unintentionally, you proved it." He hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness." "No, it's not that simple," she interrupted. "It's not about waiting, it's about understanding." He nodded. "And I understood. Maybe late, but I understood." Evelyn was silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "When you pointed the camera, I was just another statistic. Today you see me," Noah replied, his voice firm, "and I'll never stop seeing you again." She looked into his eyes. There was pain there, but also true regret, and above all, silence. A silence that, for the first time, held no weight. It just existed. Evelyn picked up a book from the table next to her and handed it to him. "Read this. It's about listening. Something you're starting to practice." He held the book out, as if receiving something sacred. "Thank you." "No need to thank me. Just keep going." And so, without hugs, without forced emotion, they parted ways. Evelyn returned to her group. Noah stood still, book in hand. The reunion had happened. Not like in the movies, but like in real life. Without spectacle, but with impact. And the most symbolic thing of all was that, in that brief moment, they both knew that something had changed forever. Evelyn's decision did not come from an impulse. She built it in silence, like everything else in life. Contrary to what many expected, she did not give in to the predictable script of public forgiveness, nor to the secret desire for revenge. She preferred the narrow path, that of discernment. Days after their reunion, she received a letter. Handwritten. No. Expensive envelope, no letterhead. Just words. It was from Noah. He told her in uncertain lines everything he had understood. He did not apologize. He simply explained what her silence had made blossom within him. And he said sincerely that he no longer knew who he was before he truly met her. Evelyn read the letter slowly on a Sunday morning at the same table she always had in the library. She closed her eyes for long minutes, and there, amidst the sound of the pages and the smell of old paper, she made her decision. She wrote back just one sentence. "What you carry now is not mine to lighten, but I hope you will use that weight wisely." She folded the paper, left it at the reception of the NGO where he worked, and didn't wait for a reply. She didn't need to continue. Noah received the note in silence. He read it. He smiled with teary eyes, and he put it in a simple envelope, along with the letter he had sent. He knew that this was the closest thing he would get to forgiveness. And it was enough. Evelyn went on with her life. She continued to judge cases, listen to stories, make decisions. Each sentence was constructed with the precision of someone who knows what it's like to be hurt by injustice. And each look she gave the defendants carried the same weight as the look she once gave Noah, firm but human. She never brought up the subject again. Not with colleagues, not with friends, not with the press, who tried at all costs to get a sentence out of her about the video about him, about the case. But Evelyn knew there are things that don't need to be said, only felt. Life took care of distancing their paths. And even when their stories crossed paths again by some coincidence, there was a kind of silent respect between them. They weren't friends, they weren't lovers. They were two people marked by a story that could have destroyed one of them, and that, ironically, built them both. The world expected her to forgive, to smile, to end it with a symbolic hug, but Evelyn knew that justice is not a spectacle, and that true forgiveness doesn't need to be offered out loud. It just needs to be experienced, and she lived in peace, without resentment, without longing, only with the certainty that, by not retaliating, by not demeaning, by not taking revenge, she had won in the most powerful way possible, without having to destroy the other. It was autumn in New York. The leaves were falling in shades of copper and gold, covering the sidewalk in front of the old restaurant where it all began, the same place where years ago a girl had been filmed in silence, humiliated by laughter that knew nothing of hunger or dignity. Now, in front of that renewed facade, Evelyn walked slowly, not as if she were visiting a trauma, but as if she were contemplating a healed scar. She stopped for a moment. Across the street, a group of students were taking pictures, laughing. She watched lightly. Time had passed, the wounds had healed, and the place no longer hurt. Evelyn took a small envelope from her bag. Inside it was a copy of the letter she had written to Noah. He walked to a small bookstore nearby and discreetly placed the envelope inside a book from the law section between the pages on ethics and reparations. He left no name, no signature, just the gesture. He walked out of the store with calm steps, while the wind carried leaves around his feet. Further ahead, Noah was walking in the opposite direction with a paper bag and a coffee in his hand. The two crossed paths for a few seconds, just a glance, no words, but they both smiled. No wave, no rush, and they continued on, in opposite directions, but in peace. If you've come this far, it's because this story touched something inside you. So comment below, "I believe in the justice of time," just so I know you felt everything this story meant. Take the opportunity to leave your like. This really helps this channel to continue telling stories that move and transform. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Come and be a part of it. And look, the video that's appearing here on the side is for you who believe that silence also speaks, and sometimes shouts louder than any voice. Click and continue with us.